Hey everyone, this will be our final lesson in this series, The Greatest. Thanks for sticking it out this far, and I hope that we can wrap this up. After this, we will have a couple short videos sprinkled in throughout the summer, but Bobby and I will really kind of be focusing on making sure that you guys have time to hang out together in a small group or youth group setting. We're still trying to figure out how that's going to work, so stay tuned. If you have any ideas, shoot either Bobby or me or a text on whatever social media platform you have us on, and we can definitely try and get some of those in the works. We're also kind of playing around with the idea of what this summer's mission trip is going to be like. Obviously, with everything going on, we can't really go outside of Michigan, but we have a lot of hopes and dreams that there will be things inside of the Rockford, Grand Rapids area that we can definitely help with. So if you have any of those ideas, you can also text, call, email, whatever you want to do for Bobby and I, and we can definitely at least put those into perspective. So without further ado, here we go. So like we had been talking about, this is the last part in our series, The Greatest, and so I kind of want to open up with a story. All right, so I had growing up, I moved around a lot. I guess not too much, but I moved around a lot for me. So when I was in third grade, my parents moved to Rockford, and so I had to start a whole new life in Rockford. And so part of that was I met a lot of people inside of my neighborhood that I lived in. And out of that came 3 friends. Me and 2 others, we became super best friends. Did everything together on Saturdays and Sundays and anytime after school and stuff like that. So we would always kind of get together, hang out, have fun. And that kind of persisted all the way through middle school, even into high school. And then once high school was about halfway over, so we were probably about sophomores, maybe juniors, one of the friends in that group, their family ended up moving out of Michigan. And with that came a lot of frustration and sadness because we were going to not see one of our friends again. So the move happens, we say our goodbyes and everything, and then me and this other friend are left hanging out. And we kind of realized right off the bat that this is not the same. It's not as fun. It's not as great. We actually find out that we don't really have that much in common. We actually don't really have that much of the same interests. We're really kind of being held together by this one friend. And so that's where I kind of want to start and lead into is this trio that we had broke apart. One person left, and I don't know about you guys, but whenever like a trio or something like that breaks apart, normally it doesn't really go well from there. It kind of feels awkward, feels like something's missing, and that's kind of the point that we're going to get to today. Ironically, it's the same is true for what we've been talking about throughout this whole entire series. Jesus' greatest commandment, which is where the greatest came from. So if you don't remember that, I'm going to read that to you. You can find it in Matthew chapter 22, and it'll be verses 37 through 39. Here we go. Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all of your mind. The first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." So basically, I'm going to boil it down really simple for you. And there are 3 things that we have on the list. Number 1, we need to love God, right? Pursue a relationship with Him. Then we have number 2, love our neighbor, which basically includes everyone. I mean, not just your actual neighbors, but anybody and everybody. Jesus calls us to do that. And then the last one, and I think this one is the one that we miss a lot too, is yourself. Love yourself. You need to see the worth that God has put in you, or the value that God has assigned to you. Right? So we have those three things. And if one of those things goes missing or is out of balance with the others, all of a sudden, it's all out of whack. It gets all thrown apart and it's all in disarray, right? But how do we actually do this? How do we balance these three greatest things and combine them in some way to make the greatest thing? And I think that's very difficult for us to understand. And it's very difficult to do. I mean, if it was super easy, we wouldn't really be having this conversation, now would we? So we're going to look at a story. I love stories, and this one I especially love. But we're going to look at a story of Jesus and his disciples. All right, so they're all eating together, and what it ended up being one of the last meals that Jesus had with his disciples. And to calm them down and to kind of give them strength, Jesus gave them an illustration that would help them kind of carry on after he was gone. This is kind of towards the end of Jesus's ministry. He's preparing them for when he's not around. And so here we go. All right. So you can find this in John, the book of John. Love that book. Not just because it's my name, but mainly because it's one of my favorite challenge. It challenges you in so many different ways, and it's so unique from everything else. But John chapter 15 and verse 5. So here we go. I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So in these verses, Jesus refers to himself and God as the vine. So God and Jesus are the vine, and the branches, that is the disciples. And so we have, for the branches, the vine is the source of life. That's where we find our worth or our value, or how do we maintain ourselves and grow. It's in the vine, all right? And it's where the branches get what they need to survive and thrive, right? So, I mean, think about it from a plant's perspective, all right? So you have the vine, think of grapes. That's the easiest example, is you have a vine, all right? And then from that vine sprouts out these branches, and these branches go out, and then all of it, like, they get nutrients from the vine. If the vine is not healthy, the branches are going to die. If the branches are not connected to the vine very well, like if it's almost cut off or it is cut off, the branches will die and wither. And Jesus talks about this a little bit more. But maybe this is a little too much of a farmy thing. Maybe you need more of a modern example. Think about this. Think about Wi-Fi. All right, so you have your Wi-Fi router, and then you have a Bluetooth speaker, and then you have headphones. All right. So when it comes to living the kind of life that God wants for us, the best way to do it is to stay close to Him. Simple enough, right? The whole bearing fruit thing that he talks about, well, it sounds weird, but it's actually a really good way in this metaphor to really teach that it shows whether it's working or not. It shows whether the vine is healthy or whether the branches are healthy because they're connected to the vine, right? Because if the branches are not connected to the vine, they're not going to grow any fruit, right? But it's through the vine giving nutrients to the branch that will help the branch produce fruit. Now, in this metaphor, right, we've got Jesus and God being the vine. We've got the branches being us, being disciples. And then the fruit is our actions, is what we do. All right? So we have to think about that. Think about how if we are producing good things, if we are having good conversations, or if we're having a good understanding of God, and we're seeing that God is working in our lives and through us, then we are producing fruit. And from that fruit, right, then we know that us, the branches, are connected to the vine closely. So in the same way, in the same goal of a grapevine, having to produce fruit, the goal of the Great Commandment is to tell you to live your life to the fullest, right? You won't bear fruit. You won't bear the fruit of God if you don't stay close to Him. Another way to say that would be you won't bear fruit God intends for you to bear if you are not connected to Him. If you are, then you will bear that fruit. See, we need to lean and look at Jesus to lead us towards that, right? Because Jesus was that figure on earth that was to show us what to do. He was God on earth. He was there to kind of give us the template or the example of what we can do. And so when it comes to these three pieces in the Great Commandment, the first step is for us to ask ourselves, what area am I out of harmony? Or what of these three, which one of these three am I out of balance with? Right? Because if things aren't working, that's a pretty good way of looking at it, is which one is out of balance. Am I leaning too much on focusing on God and ignoring my neighbor and myself? Or is it I am ignoring God and I'm focusing on my neighbors but not myself? Or is it, am I focusing on myself and being selfish and not really thinking about anybody else? And so whatever you decide, whatever you look at and see that you're needing improvement on, you need to first identify that. That's the first thing. And then what I would say to do is turn to the Bible. Open up the story of Jesus, open up to the New Testament, pick Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, and start going through it and look at how Jesus balances that. If you're stuck on how do I love God? Well, Jesus has a very clear example of that when he is being tempted in the desert. He has that sense of like, no, I'm not going to disrespect God and what He is as law, just so that I can eat. All right, and then Jesus shows throughout His whole entire ministry, shows how He is loving His neighbors, loving others, and then loving Himself is knowing that even He had, like, going to God and saying, God, if it's okay, like, I would love for this not to happen. I don't want to die on a cross, but it's your will that will be done, not mine. All of these things, these three steps that make up that greatest commandment are all being showcased by Jesus. And the greatness of the greatest commandment plays out one step at a time. It's not something that you have to get all of them done at once. No, you start with one, focus on the one you're lacking on, and go from there, right? You don't have to worry about getting them all set up and pretty right away. That's the whole point. This is a process. It takes time. But as you get better at one, then introduce the next step and start to focus on those and make sure that those two are in harmony. Then go for the third one, all right? So that's it for this series, guys. Thanks so much for watching all of these. And I tried to keep them as short as possible. I know the first ones were getting pretty long, but I just had a lot of stuff to jam pack in there. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us during this time of change and time of figuring out what's going to happen and how it's going to work out. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. Look for videos throughout the summer that we will have recorded for you guys in just a couple different areas. And we're super excited to get to see you guys in person once we're able to, safely and otherwise. So take care, guys.